You would never forget. Well, I'm here to make sure that you don't. You made me come down here the day before my 69th round of chemo. And I'm going to make sure that you never forget to take care of the 9/11 responders. Thank you for your time.
Well, there was a standing ovation. Did we cut the audio down? I guess we did. There was a standing ovation for a dying hero there. Lou Alvarez is a now retired NYPD detective who, duty-bound and honor forth, rushed to Ground Zero during the attacks of 9/11. Went straight there, didn't ask any questions. He spent 3 weeks on the pile, as we called it then, the remains of that area. After the attacks, he breathed in the toxic dust like everybody else, after being told everything was fine. And nearly 18 years later, his body is racked with stage 4 cancer. He was on Capitol Hill today along with other heroes of the day, 9/11 heroes who are now sick and are having to beg Congress to save the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund, which is running out of money and facing huge cuts. They had the support of comedian and activist Jon Stewart, who's been a longtime advocate for their cause. Jon Stewart brought along the jacket of his friend Ray Pfeiffer, a New York City firefighter who spent his final days fighting to secure medical care for 9/11 first responders and recovery workers before he died from 9/11 linked cancer. Jon Stewart called out lawmakers in an emotional speech.
What an incredible metaphor this room is for the entire process that getting health care and benefits for 9/11 first responders has come to. Behind me, a filled room of 9/11 first responders, and in front of me, a nearly empty Congress. Sick and dying, they brought themselves down here to speak to no one. Shameful. It's an embarrassment to the country, and it is a stain on this institution. And you should be ashamed of yourselves for those that aren't here, but you won't be. Because accountability doesn't appear to be something that occurs in this chamber.
And he'll be here with us live in just a moment. First, Rick Leventhal with more on the testimony. Incredible.
It was. And Detective Alvarez, 69 rounds of chemo. He was just one of thousands who rushed downtown to help out, and now are suffering significant and often deadly illnesses. One of the others who testified this morning was a high school student at Stuyvesant High School, just blocks from Ground Zero on 9/11. She was sent back to class less than a month after the attack while that pile was still burning.
I haven't even had my 20th high school reunion yet, but I already have 5 former classmates with lymphomas that I just know personally.
The compensation fund started in 2014 with $7 billion. Less than $2 billion is left, and it's scheduled to stop paying in December 2020. This despite the fact that many thousands of first responders were just added to the eligibility list, and many thousands more are expected to develop cancers in the years ahead because of the toxic air they breathe while selflessly serving the city and the nation. Jon Stewart was among those passionately imploring a subcommittee of the House Judiciary Committee to extend the program and make sure assistance is given to all who need it for as long as they live.
There is not an empty chair on that stage that didn't tweet out, "Never forget the heroes of 9/11. Never forget their bravery. Never forget what they did, what they gave to this country." Well, here they are.
One of the committee members says that the bill is expected to pass the House by a near unanimous vote. Of course, it then has to go to the Senate, pass there, and be signed by the president to become law.
All right, Rick, thank you. As promised, Jon Stewart's with us from Capitol Hill. I've never seen anything quite like that. You just laid into them.
It was a very emotional day. We were all down here, and we've come down here many times before. John Field's been down here hundreds of times for thousands of hours. And right prior to the testimony, in the hallway, they had given me a jacket from our good friend Ray Pfeiffer that they had all signed. So I was already pretty much down the hill emotionally in that moment. And I think listening to Lou's testimony and Anesta and Mike O'Connell, and I think sometimes it just became difficult to not let that emotion spill out. And that was just, it was just a tough day.
Are they mad at them?
I think it's dispiriting. I mean, I don't know if they're necessarily angry with them. I think they're sort of resigned to this idea. I don't think the character of the men and women that we're talking about, they're resigned to fighting for the benefits, not even for themselves, but for their fellow brothers and sisters that are still suffering, that aren't getting the same, you know, they slashed the benefit by 70%. As you heard in the testimony, you know, is my life worth 70% more than his life because his illness gestated for a longer period of time? So, I mean, I'll ask these guys themselves, are you angry? Is that how you're feeling?
Yeah, everybody knows me, and thank you for having us, Chef. But yeah, of course I'm angry. But today, to bear witness of these men and women who gave their testimonies, and then to watch John Minecraft a beautiful testimony. You know, these trips are physically and mentally tolling, but today, my soul hurts. I feel like I left everything on the battlefield today, and today hurts. And tomorrow we'll regroup and we'll be back here ready to battle the Senate.
Yeah, it's not going to go away. And unfortunately, we've been through this 3 times prior, and there are a lot of little shenanigans that go along. So we're really hoping that this time, the question really is why do we have to be down here to do this again?
Yeah.
Why can't it just go forward?
John, Rick just reported the bill's going to pass, but it's going to pass with reduced benefits, right?
Right now, it's with reduced benefits. Right now, it's out of funding. So Rupa Bhattacharya, who is the special master, has to reduce the benefits by 70% to conserve it, just because of the amount of people that are now coming onto the bill. What we're saying is just renew the VCF fund. There's no fraud. It runs beautifully. It's an incredible program. And look, this was war. And these are the casualties of war, and we can't stop supporting them just because they can no longer serve us. That's not an imaginable outcome for this. And these guys will continue to keep fighting. You know, I've been down here with Bob and Kenny and these guys for years. Kenny was on my show in 2010. You know, that's almost 10 years ago, and he came back again in 2015. It's unimaginable.
Who in Congress and in that subcommittee to which you were speaking today is pushing back on extending this and having full benefits for these victims?
I would say it's the so-called fiscal hawks, who, despite passing, you know, a $1.5 trillion corporate tax cut for Exxon, now claim that the percentage, which is basically a rounding error off of the deficit, is going to maybe blow up the country, you know, 10 years from now. It's irresponsible. It's disingenuous. You know, if I read you, I was telling Kenny earlier, if I read you some of the tweets and quotes that these individuals write about these 9/11 first responders and how we owe them such a great debt and how our freedom is based on their character and their struggle, and then turn around and vote these bills down, the hypocrisy is just stunning.
What can people who care at home and want to become involved do, practically speaking?
That's a great question, Shep. I mean, I'll ask these guys. Kenny, what do you think people can do at home to get involved with this if they need to?
Well, today politics is a game, and unfortunately, it's a game of life and death. I believe today's hearings went so well that we're in field goal range now. We really need the Senate to step up now and become part of this, become part of what's going on here, get behind it. Like John said earlier, the tweets, they don't matter. The accolades of "we will never forget," they only go as far as the social media site that you post them on. And then once you write your last sentence and you put your period, it's over. You close your Facebook page and you move on, and that's not good enough. And we're not going to stand for it anymore. John did great work today. John Field's done great work today. We have a lot of people behind us. This is going to happen. This was an excellent day of heart-wrenching testimony. And frankly speaking, we're getting tired of coming down here. John's tired. I'm tired. All of us are tired. It's time to move past this. It's time to get this done. We're field goal range today. We expect to score a touchdown very soon. What can people do? Find out who your local representative is in the federal government. Call them. Tell them that you're behind this. Tell them that you support this, and tell them that you want your elected official to support their phone call. Get behind this and get it done.
Good man.
Would this be the end of it, John? If this bill passes,
Absolutely.
are you good to go, or is there more ahead?
If it passes through the lifetime of these responders, yes. They keep putting a 5-year cap on it, which is why people keep having to come back. For some reason, this is the one program that they feel they've just got to keep an eye on. What we're asking for is for the VCF to be linked to the health care benefits and let these great men and women go home in peace and not have to spend their most valuable commodity as they're ill, and that's time. And so that's all we're asking for.
VCF is the Victims Compensation Fund, and that's
Correct.
what's commonly known as. But if there are people pushing back, to what do they use to justify it besides money? Because John,
Well,
we
money's
both
the
remember,
big thing.
John, right after
Yeah.
this happened. Obviously, they didn't have time to wait for answers, but it was the government that told us all the air is safe. The government told us that.
No question. And everybody down on the pile, all the students that came back, all the survivors that decided to stand their ground in that neighborhood and not allow themselves to be cowed by a terrorist act and stayed in their homes, were all put in grave danger by, I mean, Shep, you remember, I'll never forget the smell and the fires and what was burning. We knew, everything from asbestos to, pulverized concrete to mercury to everything is they were ingesting it and breathing it in, and it's done untold damage to all these guys. And a lot of what we hear down here, and this is, I think, will blow your mind, is this is a New York problem. A New York problem. As though, we had gotten hit by some type of hurricane or something along those lines, which even if that had happened, the country should be willing to stand up. This was a declaration of war, and we've used the attack on 9/11 to, generate all kinds of policy and spending. But somehow when it comes down to the first responders and the trade unions and the volunteers and the survivors, all of a sudden it's, hey man, that's your neighborhood, that's not our neighborhood.
John, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll never forget. The reason why I work so hard on this is I feel like I can never repay the debt that these men and women gave to not just New York City, but to the country. They brought a stability by their moral courage and their actions. They showed us what was so worthy of our country, why it was so important for us to fight back. And I feel like I can never repay that, and that's why we work so hard. And it's why it hurts so much to hear them dismiss it as a regional issue.
You seemed particularly angry that they weren't all in their seats there to hear from them.
That drove me nuts. And they kept saying, well, it's a subcommittee. And I'm like, but there's still people on the subcommittee that aren't here. Either 9/11 was a priority or it wasn't. But your deeds have to at some point match your tweets and your words.
You have to almost start asking yourself a question pertaining to our great government called America. If the people in New York City wasn't used as some sort of a ploy going to the next level of all this terrorism stuff that has inundated the world in one form or another. And you hate to look upon the people there in New York as them being a bunch of guinea pigs. But in a way, because the way that not only the government reacted to 9/11, but how the government responded and reacted after 9/11. Once more, you want to go to war with a country pertaining to a group of people that was known terrorists that had hunkered down in big holes by using these big bombs that supposedly sucked the very oxygen out of their canyons or caves or whatever you want to call them, as far as the Bin Laden group. But yet, no, you didn't go to war with the country that actually knowingly masterminded 9/11. That's the part there that I will never, ever get over, is that we know for a fact how many terrorists come from Saudi Arabia. But because of the financial involvement with Saudi Arabia, these poor souls right here that you just got through hearing, that's representing thousands of other people that done such of a heroic, patriotic act, get tromped on and stomped on and beat upon by our own government. It's almost as if the government itself implemented 9/11 with the Bush administration. That I believe personally is a possibility that they did allow to happen. Not indirectly, but directly, thinking that that was going to be the silver bullet that was going to rescue the American economy by basically starting a third world war. And because God wasn't in it, pertaining to the holy righteous God, and because there was a major government cover-up that began during Ronald Reagan and the old man Bush's administration, things didn't follow suit the way that various smart, rich leaders thought that they was going to pursue. Because I guarantee you that if you would have reversed the clock to the point of what occurred during, or not during, but before D-Day, that transformed into a major war of declaring war on Germany, because Germany had declared war on us pertaining to what that they was doing through China and the Pearl Harbor, there would had been a third world war. But because things was being done underhandedly and things was not being done in the proper form, with God, the holy righteous God, being in control of these affairs, God, the true God, the righteous God, the God of David, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, did not allow, and it all backfired, and we wound up spending about $6 or $7 trillion on a war in the Middle East that we didn't have a damn bit of business in being over there, pertaining to Saddam Hussein. And basically the tail, instead of the tail wagging the dog, it was the dog wagging the tail that cost trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars and costed thousands and thousands of lives just like the lives that you're looking at
And today,
right here, right here, right here. The lives that you're looking at today is all the results of collateral damage that stem from a war that was brought upon to us that the officials at that time did not respond promptly and professionally in the degree that they should have responded in. Please listen to just a little bit more of this, because to be quite frank with you, it goes beyond just a heart-wrenching moment. It actually is demoralizing to our very institution that we call America, because this is basically what has put us towards where we are right now, towards all our local, state, and federal jails being full, us being almost $22 trillion in debt, and troubles on every bay imaginable. What occurred either during, after, or before this event is exactly what has put us in harm's way towards being in peril. And I think various people in Congress, going all the way back to various people that was in the Reagan administration as well as the Bush administration, I know the young Bush administration should be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law towards what the hell actually happened. Historians, okay, 100 years from now, they're going to be able to identify, because right now all the dust hadn't settled. But the historians 100 years from now, after I'm dead and gone, are going to be able to put all these pieces together. And their pieces that they're going to put together are going to fit the very formula in what I've been teaching, preaching, and telling people about as far as the Saudis, since I have stood out into the eyes of the general public, pertaining to the Grand Master of the Antichrist that now lives over in Saudi Arabia, that is supposed to come out of the forefront towards being the one and only Red Horseman, second seal of Satan, that is to show his ugly face in these last days. But I'm supposed to be crazy. I'm supposed to be psychologically, emotionally, chemically imbalanced. I'm supposed to be a bamboozler, according to some people. Though I haven't asked for a dime out of any of the locals around here pertaining to the Windmill Ministries missions. My heart goes out. My heart goes out. My heart goes out to these people that has suffered immensely over the acts of war. Please listen.
It did important for us to fight back. And I feel like I can never repay that. And that's why we work so hard. And it's why it hurts so much to hear them dismiss it as a regional issue.
You seemed particularly angry that they weren't all in their seats there to hear from them.
That drove me nuts. You know, and they kept saying, well, it's a subcommittee. And I'm like, but there's still people on the subcommittee that aren't here. Either 9/11 was a priority or it wasn't. But your deeds have to at some point match your tweets and your words. And today it didn't. But it's our hope, all of us, that their deeds will match it tomorrow, and that this will get done, and that, look, no amount of money is going to end the suffering and the grieving that these men and women have to endure.
Right.
But they can stop making it worse.
Right.
They can stop adding uncertainty and stress and financial hardship.
Right.
To the lives of these folks.
Right.
That's all this is about.
You're such a great guy. Thank you, John.
All right. Thanks, Shep. We appreciate the coverage.
I never ask you during these segments but about anything else, because that would steal the headline. But I hope you'll come back, like maybe June
Yes, sir.
26th. Let's talk about something else.
Okay, sir.
God bless them all. John, Kenny, Lou,
Thank you,
and you,
sir.
John. See you later.
Thank you.
Crazy, right? A live look at the House floor now. Speaking of, Congressman Lou, I believe that it.
No, it's not crazy. It's sad. It's disheartening. It's sickening to think that we have been abandoned. And I'm going to use that word, abandoned, by our own government that uses those same set of policies towards if you are engaged in warfare and you abandon your post, you are looked upon as being the scummest of the scum. Because now, all of a sudden, you are charged with a treasonable act of abandonment, or you have forsaken your duties. These men and women that are suffering did not abandon their duties. But yet now, our government has. So how does this line up with the principal standards of what we're supposed to live with and live by in today's unified alliances that sends out a message to the rest of the people in the world who want to become part of us, who want to become Americans? What kind of message does this put out there to the general public pertaining to a government that says, do as I do as I say, but not as I do? What kind of message, what kind of mixed message is that whenever you have a government that is willing to do its own people that way? Now, I say all that to say this. The leadership of today, through Donald Trump, I don't think is nothing like the past 3 or 4 administrations that we've had. And thank God that they're not. Because the path that we was on, if we would have stayed on that path, I'm sure by now America would be looking at total different facts, total different dynamics, total different numbers, total different circumstances that has occurred because of the past 3 or 4 administrations. If there's ever been a time that we as American citizens needed to pray, stay strong, and stay united in that in which what we believe it is today. Because like these men and women that spoke of on this floor pertaining to the suffering, that people are still suffering because of this. This hasn't went away. And though you may see the tangible suffering in the Manhattan district, in the New York district, it has still brought other suffering untold that has befallen upon to this great nation in one form or another. And if it hasn't been in the financial industry department, it has been in seeing retribution fall from the skies, because God is trying to correct these people and bring their deeds up front in letting others transparency see what that they have done, that they should have done, that they didn't do. And because of it, of the guilty, it's making it also tough and hard on the innocent. It's kind of like whenever the Bible talks about that whenever God rains upon the just, he also rains upon the unjust, as far as bringing blessings to the agriculture community. Well, it works in the opposite direction whenever God brings retribution. Whenever you have a group of people that refuses to wake up because of the hypocrisy that they have led others down the road of believing or taking a part of, and whenever retribution falls upon to society, it just doesn't hit the guilty, it also affects the innocent. Now, you may be saying, well, what kind of a God would do that? I'm going to tell you what kind of a God would do that. A holy, righteous God. A God that believes in all for one and one for all. That's who would do that. Because if the people let down the people, that's one thing. But if the people let down God, that's whenever God steps in, and that's whenever he starts taking charge of the elements and making it that much more tougher for that society to get out of their kinks. Because he's trying to display a message to that society. And if that society don't take heed to that message, then God will bring more hardship to that society. He's doing these things as a teacher, as a mentor, as an instructor. And it's up to us to pay attention. Well, how come we're getting these massive earthquakes that are now bombarding us every year or every other year? How come we're getting these massive fires and these massive floods and all these other irregular weather events that are just absolutely off the charts pertaining to these weather events? How come things has mysteriously gotten unbalanced in the format of going from normal to abnormal just within a few years? These people was told by the American government. These people was told and lied to by our professionals, by our experts. Go in, do your jobs, and we'll reward you for it. And now these people are having to go up to the Senate and Congress and beg for something that rightfully was already promised to them to begin with. See the mask, see the mask, see the mask, 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 mask. This was war. What you're seeing here is war. What you're seeing here is the aftermath of war that the Saudi Arabia government, for whatever reason, decided to declare upon to the American people. And we basically took it up the rear end and retaliated by going to war with the wrong people. That has now cost us.
In the city and the nation. Jon Stewart was among those passionately imploring a subcommittee of the House Judiciary.
That has costed us that much more in lives, in money, in time, in grief,
That didn't tweet out,
and in despair.
never forget their bravery, never forget what they did, what they gave to this.
One of the committee members says that the bill is expected to pass the House by a near unanimous vote. Of course, it then has to go to the Senate, pass there, and be signed by the President to become law.
All right, Rick, thank you. As promised, John Stewart's with us from Capitol.
It goes beyond a heart wrench. If you're in war and you don't do what you're told, you get charged for desertion. Desertion is one of the worst crimes, other than being an actual traitor to your people. But desertion is one of the worst charges of dishonorable discharge that you can get after committing to your patriotic political stance. Has our government, in ways, not deserted the very people who went through such horrendous acts of pain and acts of suffering untold? Has our government not deserted us? You know, you have to stop and ask yourself a question. What the hell was all that about? Was it over oil? Was it over food? Was it over gold? Diamonds? Pearls? Land rights? What the hell was all that about? And to this day, you still cannot get a straight answer out of your Congress that's been in power, some of them 30, 40 plus years. That's sad.